everybody. We are back with another edition of KC Music Talk. My guest today is a bass player, guitar player, and badass himself, Joe Pruessner. How you doing, man?
Good, Rob. Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
So I literally just met you like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And we got in touch with kind of mutual friend of ours, Tom DeMasters.
That's right, Tom DeMasters.
And yeah, he's a really nice guy.
Nice guy, great guitar player, good musician all around, great theory knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's already been on the show, whatever episode that was, but yeah, and you guys met at Wichita State,
That's
right?
right.
Which is my alma mater, which
That's
is totally
right.
cool.
Wichita State. We were there. I think we graduated the same year.
You guys did graduate?
Well, yeah. I've got the paper someplace.
But yeah, that's cool, man. And just to mention, that was during the heyday of like Jerry Hahn. He's a big name down in the area.
Exactly. It was great. Studied with Jerry, and like these jazz improv classes, a big group of people, and Jerry has a great sense of humor, and the classes were great.
Oh yeah.
And then the other terrific thing was being able to go see him play.
Oh yeah.
Which of course is where you learn more in that kind of environment.
Oh sure, yeah. And I don't know if I ever got to hear him play. I just heard. I mean, he was like legend status. I just heard everybody talk about him. And Craig Owens was the guy. I don't know if you know Craig, but he's the predecessor or whatever to him, and he talked about him very, very highly.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why Tom mentioned or suggested that you come talk with us on the show is that you definitely have a good history playing music and stuff, and you're a bass player, by the way, right?
That's right, upright and electric.
Mm-hmm.
That's my moneymaker.
Sure, yeah. That's cool, man. And so like for some of the people that don't know you, just tell them a little bit about some of the stuff that you've done. Or whatever.
Right. Well, we just were talking about Tom DeMasters. I went to Wyandotte High School in Kansas City, Kansas. Yeah, tough school, but man, you get an education there. But there were some great players. Oscar Polk, who's playing around, Tim Bailey, a lot of great players. So we had a terrific four-piece jazz ensemble. Wayne Hawkins was I
know Wayne.
Wayne, we graduated the same year.
He's something else,
man. He's a great
Very
player.
Good keyboard player.
Great player. So we had a quartet at Wyandotte, and like the first time I ever saw Tom, he was kind of peeking his head around the door, saying, "Who's that band?" And so then Tom and I had a trio at Wichita State. We played downtown at the Oyster Bar on Douglas, and that was great. Again, that's talking about gigging and listening to people. The best way to learn jazz, if you ask me, is on the gig. You get in for young guys, get in a trio. We didn't get much money. We got free shrimp, all you could eat, 2 nights a week. When you're in college, it's a pretty good thing.
So you don't get dollars anymore; you get shrimp, right? That's how this works now.
I think we got $10,
right?
$10 a night,
wow.
And all the shrimp you can eat. So yeah,
that is funny, man. Yeah. And so you were so let's stay on that for a second though, because you're mentioning a really good point. Because in classical, we go have 19 rehearsals and then 1 gig. Right, and then like in the country scene, I've noticed since I've been in the country scene, it's like 19 gigs for 1 rehearsal. Right, and a lot of people have this argument with different bandmates and different people that are learning about how much do you learn at a gig? Can you have everything ready to go and then you play pretty awesome, or does it go the other way? Or
I think as you say, I think it's a different thing in the classical world than in rock and jazz. The classical thing, now I got a master's degree from Indiana University, studied with Murray Grodner. They're a fantastic bass teacher. But you really, really woodshed all of the parts for symphonic repertoire if that's what you're heading into. I also, by the way, just so you know, I played in the Wichita Symphony when I was there, as well as being in the trio. And then after that, played with different different orchestras in the Bay Area, including getting to sub regularly with the San Francisco Symphony and
They still have a huge reputation for being an excellent symphony.
They just fantastic. I started.
They did the Metallica one, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah,
they did.
The S&M album.
Yeah. And
it's the only reason why I know of them, actually. But I've heard very, very good things.
I missed the fact that I didn't get to play on them. But going back to that though, that it's very important for anybody that's heading or thinking about orchestral career to really become very familiar with the repertoire, I think, to be able to transition well into an orchestra. Because there your parts are written out. And then, of course, in rock, a lot of times you're playing parts as well. So you need to learn that. But the jazz environment, I think learning on the job is the best thing because it's always a creative...
Right, yeah, and that's I guess a good point because it's obviously in classical it's going to sound different because you're sitting there by yourself and then you get with the group and it's obviously different. But jazz, it's really different, right? I mean, you can sort of know your head and you can sort of know the chords and stuff, but it's always going to be just whoa, what's going? You're just going, and people are improvising and making it up, and then they go over here and like.
That's right. And you play with different players, and everybody's got a little something different to say, and all that. Yeah.
And then in classical, like the music is so ridiculously hard when you're up at a San Francisco Symphony kind of level. I mean, the music's ridiculous, right? So you can't just show up and sight read it. I mean, you just can't, right?
Yeah. Well. That's one thing about learning the repertoire. Right. Because, for me, I might get called on a Tuesday morning saying, can you be here at 11 o'clock for a rehearsal, And in that case, you really hope that, if you're playing a Brahms symphony or something like that, you know the notes so you can, pay attention. But the very first gig I did with them was a Bela Bartok's Divertimento for strings, and if you've played it,
sure. I haven't played that, but I know about Bartok. I mean, he's really all over the place, right? I mean, it's not straight ahead.
Not at all. The level of difficulty is way up there. So, as you say, you gotta, to keep being a substitute in that orchestra, I definitely had to spend some hours.
Oh, sure, and you're not. And being a substitute in that, I can't even imagine how ridiculous that would be, because, I mean, you're getting full rehearsal schedule as a regular player, and then you're coming in and deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's,
exactly. And they expect you to perform, or otherwise they don't call you back.
Yeah, so right, yeah. You better get it together, yeah. And then, so you... with orchestras, you said you were in the Malaysian Symphony too, or you've done many of the...
That's right. Well, I just left that job this summer, Malaysian Philharmonic. I auditioned in Los Angeles about 20 years ago, got offered the job, and took it. We've been playing over there for quite a while. Started started in the section and then took auditions internally and moved up to second chair or principal bass. Got to do a lot of good stuff. Yeah. A lot of good conductors. A lot of not good conductors, but we won't go into that. But Fabio Luisi, Donald Runnicles, Case Bockles, some really fantastic musicians. That's a great joy.
One thing that I think is so cool, and I think you and I are probably really similar in this way, that there's a guy in town, what's his name, Marvin Greenbaum, I don't know if you know him, but he's a viola player, but he plays tons of like fiddle stuff, and he's very good at jazz, and he's viola in Casey Symphony, and you don't see that very much. You don't see the crossover a whole lot. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't
know. Like in regards to classical, and then I consider it to be like everything else is pretty much similar to me of country, rock, blues, what jazz, whatever.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting point for sure. I knew more guys in California that crossed over and did different styles than I have other places. And I don't know. Maybe it's upbringing or something. I know when I was going to school here, I was playing a lot of different styles, listened to a lot of different styles. My parents and my older siblings listened to a lot of styles. And like you, I've always been interested in a lot of different styles and play them and work, in different styles as well.
I think that, like, because I've noticed this definitely in the academia world, is that you have these classical guys that they get told that when they're playing like Beethoven or something, that this is pretty much as good as it gets. I mean, this is beautiful music. I mean, it's timeless, and this is like you can't. This style of music cannot be like overtaken or something. They get that mentality, and so when they go over to country or blues or whatever, they're like, and I think in their mind they've got kind of a book syndrome figured out, where like this stuff is like book 10 and then blues and country is like book 2, and they kind of have that kind of mentality in their head, and that's in regards to like technique, because you playing like a Mahler symphony and then going over and playing your Cheatin' Heart, it's, technique wise, it's not even in the same universe, but there are, there's a whole bunch of really great things about country, which is why an opera singer has a monstrous voice, but he comes sing country and you're like, oh, no, it's not really working, He's tapering notes too much, right? He's doing too much vibrato. His technique and all that stuff is, you want to actually not enunciate completely perfectly,
exactly.
all that kind of stuff.
And have no vibrato, sometimes real flat.
Right, and so I think the classical people get the mentality that is beneath me, all these other genres. Yeah. And then you get over to the blues guys in town, for example. Whenever I come and talk to them, they're all like, oh, dude, Muddy Waters. Oh, dude, Steve Ray Vaughan. Oh, man, dude, man. And then I'm like, you think they're like the best guitar player ever? Like ever? Really? I'm like, you ever heard of Wes Montgomery? You ever heard of like, the 10,000 others you can mention? John McLaughlin. And so I don't know. That's my opinion, is they think that there's nothing else there, and then these guys, the classical people, know it's all there. Yeah. They just are like, oh, well.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's weird. We can have this conversation for a long time, and maybe we'll figure it out at some point. I wonder, thinking about my own experiences going to Wichita State and going to Indiana University, both of them had great jazz programs. So I wonder, maybe sometimes it has to do with being in a conservatory or something, where like that's the only thing they listen to, and maybe they listen to their teachers a little too much too.
I think that's probably right. I mean, there's definitely a difference between everybody that comes out of academia, and then I thought that's all there really was. And then after I get out here, I'm realizing all these blues guys, untrained, right? A lot of the jazz guys are definitely trained, but the rock guys, the country guys, the Irish musicians, they're all not trained, so it was, I think you'd probably get different answers from those people.
But you think about, let's say Steve Vai, Jeff Beck. Now these guys are phenomenal technicians, no doubt about it.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say a little bit about your history, I guess, is that not to name drop, but you've heard of Joe Walsh, haven't you?
I have heard of Joe Walsh. I'm trying to think of a story right here. Well, he loaned me his rental car, which was what was it? It was really nice. And then my aunt, who is his mother, got really mad. Joe was on tour. He's my cousin, first cousin, and he comes down and he says, "Which one of you guys has a license?" And I said, "I did." So here's the keys. And the next morning, my aunt, Walsh's mother, was not a happy woman, Aunt Tuffy was kind of pissed
What
off.
age was that? Was that like high school age? Or?
Yeah, I'd had my license for a little while. I was maybe 18. I was maybe 17, but yeah, she didn't think that was so great.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. And they're from, and you guys are from Wichita. I mean, Joe Walsh is very known down in Wichita.
That's right. I was talking with my mom about the whole thing. His biological father, Bob Fiddler, went to college with my dad, I think, and somehow they all got introduced. My mom and her sister, Joe Walsh's mom, so all of that, and then all down there in Wichita. He's older than me, of course, so didn't hang out with him too much, but I did get to work with him. He was really, really nice. He invited me to play a session with him in Santa Barbara, and which was, man, talk about state of the art, great studio.
Yeah, wow.
Just everything.
I'm scared.
Yeah, I was too.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's funny. And then it sounds like, not to name drop hard, but I mean, you're telling me getting to talk to Branford or whatever. And Marsalis,
in the Malaysian Philharmonic, I was the go-to guy for jazz bass, of course, and some other instruments too, guitar and doubling banjo, 6-string banjo. But Branford was there a few times and got to work with him. But this last piece I played was by John Williams, and I can't remember the name of the composition. It was for a film with Tom Hanks, maybe, or does that ring a bell? Yeah. Where he's getting chased. And John Williams wrote the middle section of this piece for saxophone, vibes, and upright bass, and it's killer. I mean, it's really hard, and it was great to play it. Me and the vibes player, who was also from the orchestra, practiced a lot. As you can imagine.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be most nerve-wracking crap in the entire world.
Exactly. And then, in the first rehearsal, we played it, and it was
so Branford's playing.
Yeah, Branford's playing. And he's a great guy. Sure. Just a salt of the earth, man. Wonderful guy.
Yeah.
But we pretty much nailed it. And that was a great feeling.
Oh, yeah, I bet. Yeah. Yeah, that's really great, man. I mean, I'm all about name dropping on this show.
Okay, cool.
I'm not just kidding. But so one of the other questions I was going to ask you that I'm always curious about, because I'm not an expert about the gigging in this town, but I definitely have some sort of an idea about the scene and stuff. Some of the other towns that you've been in, what's the kind of like gigging environment? And I'm talking about kind of the guys on the symphony level, the studio guys, that not the Branford, level, but the other kind of lower level guys.
Right.
Well, tell me some stuff about some of the other, places you've been to in regards to like what are musicians kind of looking for, getting kind of paid for, like a jazz gig, for example, or like the networking between musicians and finding gigs and stuff.
Yeah. Well, in the symphonic world, I just took all the auditions I could when I got to the Bay Area, and then you get to meet, you start meeting people, and they know what your playing's like, and you get the calls. Being reliable is extremely important in terms of networking in that thing. Being on time, wearing the right color shoes, which I didn't do one time, but I since then I learned my lesson.
So let's stay on that. So with the regards to being reliable, that's definitely a big thing that weeds people out in this town. I've noticed, because like how many good piano player jazz guys are there in the town? I mean, I don't even want to guess. There's a lot, and so
a lot of good guitar
or
players
drummers would be another example. There's a crap load of good drummers in town that are plenty capable of playing your show, like talent wise.
Yeah.
But how important is that to not be flaky with the phone, right, and not show up late?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Well, very, very important. Very important. If you want to, really pursue that and get work, then yeah, you got to be reliable. Show up on time. Make sure your equipment is working, and then be a reasonable human being.
And then how many of them does that weed out? Being not a reasonable human being.
Yeah, well, I've been
fighting with the band leader and blah blah blah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff too. Yeah, just smile and yeah.
So that's what you do, right? Is you smile and nod, and then that's it.
Yeah. Well,
that's the lesson.
Yeah. Well, that and play good.
And play good.
Yeah. I mean, gig-wise, I don't know how Kansas City is. I know I've been offered a few gigs of $75, $100, and that seems to be about the way it is for pickup gigs.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it is here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're getting 100, 125 plus tips, that's a pretty good day.
Right.
Even 3-4 hour gigs.
Right.
I mean.
Yeah. What can you say? The supply and demand and the market, and it is what it is. We'd all like to see the pay go up, but
it just is what it is.
The market is what it is.
Yeah, and so like with the networking stuff, I know one thing I like to talk about, and the whole point of the show is that I've met so many people here. And one of the reasons why I've met so many people is because there is a mentality here of openness. People are like interested in even, and I've heard this being different in other towns, even guitar players being friends with other guitar players, which in some towns I've heard it is not exactly like that.
Happen, yeah.
And I know for me, like I'm rarely playing like any other gig with another fiddle player, and definitely in a string quartet or symphony thing I am, but like a jazz gig, they're never hiring 2 fiddle players. So I know some of them, but all of my friends are like bass and drummers. You know what I mean? And saxophone players or whoever, guitar players. And so what's been your experience in other towns in regards to like networking?
Right. Well, I mean, one thing about Kansas City that I realize when I come here, whenever I come back, and I've been around the world a bit, certainly the Northern Hemisphere, is that it's truly a friendly town. Kansas City is a friendly place, and it's easy to have conversations where you might not be able to do that in other cities. Certainly Kuala Lumpur, where I was living, it's much more difficult to have conversations. So I think that's one aspect of it, but also thinking about KL in Malaysia. I'm glad I wasn't a freelancer there, because there was a lot of unfriendly behavior between different falling in and out with different people, and I was really happy that I didn't have to deal with that. I mean, I had my own quartet that I did with a fantastic violin player, Miroslav Danish, who's from Czech Republic. And he's got that gypsy stuff in his blood, and it's, so anyway, I had that quartet, and there were a lot of times where we'd have to hire some extra guys to come in depending on the gig, and the kind of I don't want to say malicious, but the kind of vibe between some of the different players was not great.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be telling you about other people, and you'd be like, man, I don't really want to hear it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, well, KC is definitely a jam kind of town. Like even our shows, people have people come and sit in on their shows, even not just the open jams, but their shows. They even run and then even people run, because we have so many musicians that are, in my opinion, sort of lazy. Instead of like book or playing songs that are a bunch of like 7-8 chord country tunes, they'll play like Can't You See? instead. Marshall Tucker, like 3-chord tune. You know, they'll just pick tunes that are really easy, and then so they can have anybody. They never have to practice, right? Because everybody can all come in and just do it, and then subs can just come in and do it, and then all the jams are obviously very jammy, where everybody just gets really good at. You know, just yell out, hey, shuffle an A, okay, you know, and everybody does their shuffle an A, and slow blues in D, okay, you know, they all do. And so everybody just, like, has this mentality of really jamming together, and it's really cool. It's a really cool thing, because I think a lot of places don't do that, but I think that mentality is sometimes can be annoying, because everybody's doing, can't you see, you know, not that song, but everybody's doing songs like that, where it's just really easy. It's good. It's a good song. I love playing it, but they never do, you never hear, like, in like the classic rock world, you never hear Money, Pink Floyd, you never hear Ramblin' Man, you never hear like some of these other songs that some guys might be able to play, but that's a little too much work. You know, I just want to be able to come in and play and not really do anything. You know, so I think the whole mentality is sort of that way, and so that leads back to my point about why one of the reasons why it's so advantageous to not piss everybody off in town, right? Because there's somebody in tonight that's going to need a sub in town somewhere. Right. Somebody, you know, or maybe 10 different bands need a bass player.
Right. Well, have them call me.
Yeah, yeah, for real, because everybody always could have a gig. But anyway, so for you being we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some other musical things now we're talking about with being like a good like kind of studio type guy to get calls and stuff? What are some now musical things that would be wise to have?
Well, I tell you, on the upright bass, of course, intonation is a thing, and also on fretless electric. You know, you got to really work that, and you know, practicing scales and arpeggios for intonation on those on a fretless instrument is a really good way to work on that.
Dude, intonation on an upright, screw that.
Yeah.
Man, my viola's hard enough, man. You guys are like,
well,
I mean,
that's the thing I always say, like,
whole area
you know, that's a whole step.
Yeah.
And for, you know, a fiddle player.
You're right,
yeah, that and a good time, you know.
Sure.
I've had a lot of different discussions with different teachers over the years about working with a metronome or a drum machine, but I personally find it to be very beneficial. Very beneficial. And even then, sometimes, I mean, this is, you know, when you're working on it when you're a younger guy, playing with a drum machine or metronome, and then turning it off, and then playing the same thing and recording yourself and seeing where you're
see if the metronome's getting faster.
Exactly. See if the metronome's broken. Yeah.
No, if you're getting slower. No, But, so you're saying that some other people are kind of arguing against metronomes.
I know.
So what would their argument be then?
I know, and getting back to classical guys, it's a lot of the time it's classical guys, and they're saying they want their students to develop their own inner sense of rhythm. But, you know, it's like, how do you develop that? That's the question. And I think, you know, whatever technology you can use, as long as it's getting ingrained. I think that's absolutely viable.
So I mean, so the best solution would be start with it and then take it out, right?
Yeah.
Because I love the argument that you're at the gig and you don't have a drummer. What you gonna do? Right. You know, I mean, you got to have that. You know,
exactly.
I mean, I hear that argument. That's a good argument.
For sure.
That you can't just, because I think this happens in maybe like middle schools and high schools a lot, where the teacher knows that the metronome is really good, but then it's the crutch. I mean, is that their argument?
I suppose so, and it's exactly as you say. The idea is not to rely on it, but to learn from it. You know, so you can't turn it on and use it all the time. Certainly. Although, if you know, in the studio, if you want to create a pop, really hit kind of direction, then, you know, being straight in time is very important because you got to layer tracks. So,
Sure,
so working
sure.
with the click track and all
Right.
that.
Mhm.
But that's the studio.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. But yeah, exactly right.
Yeah,
Working
so
with
so I
and
guess
from.
that what I was getting at with what you need to be a studio player, and I wasn't going to ask this, but this is actually a good question. So I know I've had a lot of arguments with like students, parents, and then definitely other musicians about the idea of being really broad or being like a specialist, so this like kind of in regards to should I get average to good on like 3 or 4 different instruments or be a complete badass on one, or doing that with like genres, for instance, where you're a guy and you get pretty good at blues, rock, jazz, country, or blues, rock, country, whatever, but then you kind of whatever about classical and you just kind of stay in your little zone, or you're a blues guy.
Yeah.
And you dabble off into a couple rock songs here and there, a couple country tunes that are bluesy, but you kind of stay. What's your opinion on that in regards to studio guys?
Well, I mean, one thing is it probably depends on the individual. If you have a real craving, say, to be a concert violinist or to play, violin in an orchestra, then definitely that you should pursue and really do that. But I know, I mean, for myself, it's worked out really well being able to play different instruments and different styles. And of course, I'm always been interested in that too. So, I mean, from an individual perspective, I wanted to learn and wanted to play a lot of the, different styles.
Mm-hmm.
But it's worked out well for me professionally. I mean, contractors, people that hire you, word gets out that you play these different styles and whatnot. I mean, a new thing I'm putting on my resume is that I can play the banjo part for Porgy and Bess, for instance. Because I did that with a guy named Wayne Marshall over in Malaysia. But yeah, I think, I mean, it's very good, I think, for musicians to learn at least a little something about other styles.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But in terms of work, I mean, it depends. Depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're a bass player with an established band, and work on that and dedicate your time to the band, because that's also a marvelous thing when you got 4 or 5 guys that play together all the time, and
you can hear it, can't you?
Yeah,
you can hear it. You guys have been playing about 4 years together. You can, or whatever. Yeah,
for sure.
I guess I'm always frustrated. I guess because I noticed this when I was with my ex-girlfriend, and she was really into Irish stuff, and so we'd go down to the Irish jams, which I'd never really experienced before, and it was really cool. It was just a whole genre of music that I didn't know, but I was noticing that everybody walks in with like 5 cases, and they have their mandolin and their banjo and their guitar and then their fiddle and their whistle, and like, I mean, everybody has their, and then my opinion is that there was like maybe 1 or 2 guys that could go over to the banjo and like hack it pretty hard, and then they get out their fiddle and they have enough bow grip and enough, to really get some stuff going. But it just felt like a lot of them were, and this is harsh, but kind of average on like 5 instruments. And to me, like to me, upright and electric, as a bass player, you're probably going to tell me that there is a lot of differences there. But to me, those are so similar compared to like clarinet and bass, so I understand that all of those are strings and a lot of them are picking and stuff. And even like viola to violin is really similar, I mean, you use basically the exact same bow grip. So it's like,
press your fingers.
And a little bit of tone, but it's basically the same thing. And so and then when people come and ask me like, I'll have my band and I want this guy for guitar, and he's like, well, I play a little bass, why don't you hire him for guitar and have me do bass? And I'm like, no, I want you on guitar. This is what you play. I want you tearing it up on the guitar and not sort of kinda on the bass. I totally understand what you're saying about not just genres but different instruments anyways, because we have different knowledge now. Both of us could have a conversation about clarinet, and neither one of us play it. We would both be able to have at least something to say about the clarinet.
Yeah.
But so I guess my thing is, do people get into the symphony playing 5 instruments?
Well, no. That
You know,
the
and
short
that-
answer. Yeah.
Having fun,
Yeah.
go for it.
Sure.
But
sure, exactly.
are you gonna ever become Michael Jordan playing 5 sports?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what you think about that. Is,
well,
is
no,
that fair or is
that's
that?
no. I think that is fair. You know, and my doubling on in an orchestra situation, I've played a little bit of rhythm guitar, and again, I've got a banjo, which is a doubler's banjo as well. It's a 6-string instrument, so I'm like a fake banjo player.
Is that guitar tuned or
Guitar
is it,
tuned, tuned like a guitar. And actually, I even was asked to play mandolin, just a little rhythm, and I tuned that like the top 4 strings of a guitar. And yeah,
cheater. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah. So I mean, I'm not at all a player like that. But yeah, when you talk about the Irish Festival and stuff like that, it's like I think you are talking about a lot of guys that are not professional musicians.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and they love playing the different instruments, and that's fun too. But you know, in terms of getting that real high level of proficiency and getting a gig, I think you got to kind of narrow it down. So.
And I even do that because I'm kind of more of a multi-person when it comes to genres, which it sounds like you are too. You know, maybe my advice would be stick to your one instrument, because then you gain this 30 years of technique, 30 years of muscle memory, and then but you're now diving out into different genres, but that's not screwing with your technique as much, right? Your bow grip is still the same, no matter if you're playing jazz, if you're playing, you know.
Right.
And so I don't know, that's just, and maybe the way that I'm wrong about my opinion of this is I'm putting professional standards on somebody that's not wanting to be a professional.
Well, that could certainly be, yeah. I mean, and then of course some of them are. And great players for sure. Yeah. But an awful lot are I don't think that's their main goal.
Cool.
Yeah.
It is mine, and it's not theirs, and maybe that's unfair. He had to do that. All right, so I got a couple more for you here. Sure. What was a thing in a previous band that didn't work very well?
Well, I knew a guy that really wanted to be the lead singer. And man, he didn't really even sing. He just kind of had this talking vocal thing, you know. And people used to say that. And I was about 19 or something, and I got talked by this guy into going up to South Dakota and trying to work in a small town there. And I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wanted to see South Dakota.
So what, did he think that was his style or something? That was it. I don't know what even like a James Brown style or something where you're kind of half singing, half.
Yeah, but it wasn't nearly as good as James Brown. I'm thinking, who was the guy? The Eye of the Cat, something like that. Who had kind of a bit of a vocal style in his singing.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
This guy wanted to do that, and it never really made it to pitch. And, people used to come up and go, well, you guys sound pretty good, but what's with the, how come you're not singing? So, yeah, that was it. I don't know, I've had some other bands that didn't work out. Do you know Paul Elwood by any chance? Great banjo player, great composer, and we got along great in every band that I was ever in with him. But since we were at Wichita State, we were also studying new music, right? Aleatoric, adding some different effects in. And I remember one time we're doing something that the words were something about down dirty in the coal mine. So we started making some string noise and stuff like that, and this guitar player just turned around and was like, forget it, you guys are out of the band.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So you guys had a creative, artsy thing that you're gonna try to make this cool, and he was not having that.
He was not having that.
Yeah.
And that was fine. I was happy to say, okay.
So the other guy that did the talk singing thing. So again, as a band leader, I'm really curious. So what happened with that? Like, how did that get resolved, or like what?
The band fell apart, and
Yeah.
and that seems to be the case most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm always curious how people handle moments like that, right? When it's like, when you have something like maybe what he was doing was this monstrous elephant in the room that the whole audience could tell, the whole band could tell, and then how do somebody, as a teacher, I want to know, how do I deal with this moment? How do I come at this guy?
Yeah.
What words do I need to use? What timing do I need? When do I need to tell him?
Right.
Do I tell him? You know, like,
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I think that's the number one reason why bands die, is because of the personal relationships, and people get pissed with each other or whatever. Or,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on that about dealing with
I do. Again,
relationships?
and thinking of, if it's a bandmate, it's different than if it's a student. If it's a student, you have, in some ways, an easier time. You've got a bit of an obligation to tell them. And then, at least for me, I try to form the words based on what I know about the personality of the student. What can he deal with a kind of hard thing, or do you come about it and say, maybe this is not exactly the right direction for you.
Right.
Whereas with bandmates, sometimes you just say, man, it ain't working.
Mm-hmm. Or whatever is not working. Not that the band itself isn't working, but this part of the band is not like, these songs, this way you're singing, etc. Right?
Yeah, and exactly. And what can we do to make it a better ensemble? You might ask a question like that.
I know Charles Barkley was talking about basketball on TV, and he was talking about that moment where, when he became the leader of the kind of leader of the team, he said that was the hardest thing about becoming a leader, is knowing who he could yell at and who he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because some guys, like, especially in this is well known in the football world. I mean, people just scream. They just scream at you. The coach is screaming at you, and some people will pump them up, and then they'll play better, and some people just go in the corner in fetal fetal position, and he was joking that most of the time you figure that out too late. I thought that was a funny thing for him to say, is that unfortunately what we want to know beforehand. We want to know we want to have that intuitiveness. And they were another sports analogy. They talked about people like Phil Jackson and Chuck Daly, basketball coaches that were just geniuses with people. They could just tell what is gonna. They had this big book, and they just knew like which paragraph to pull out for this guy right now, and they just had this genius way of.
But that comes
psychology
after
some
time of dealing with people. I mean, and I think that has to do with it too. Perspective,
Mm-hmm.
How long you've been kind of at it, and judging character based on that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about one story. I don't know if this is appropriate, but I taught at UC.
It's probably not.
Probably not. I taught at UC Santa Cruz, and I had this student who, the guy, he didn't practice. And he would come in. Sometimes he practiced, but he'd come into lessons stoned sometimes too. So I used to just get behind him and go, make noises until he'd turn around, and then I would just pretend that, and then I noticed that behavior changed. He could stop coming to class stoned, and I think, well, that was one way to deal with that kid anyway.
So what were you trying to do there? What was the
make him uncomfortable.
Oh.
Making him uncomfortable with the fact that he hadn't practiced and that he was coming to lessons.
Wow,
not
that's
the way
interesting. Yeah, see, I would have never thought to take it or to come at him like that.
Yeah. Work a bit on the psychology. I don't know that I'm that good at it, but
right. Yeah, I'm always fascinated with that, because I'm really fascinated. I've said this on the show about every time, is that I'm fascinated by things that like trump other things. Like, so for example, in teaching, when you have the greatest book ever written by a man, but nobody wants to read it, right? It's done.
Yeah.
You have the greatest teacher in the world, but the student doesn't want to listen. It's done. It's like you have the greatest idea for a band, period, but this guy won't call you back.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm just fascinated by those moments and thinking about what is in my power in that moment, if it's teaching or as a band, what there is something that's in my power, but the whole part of this is not in my power. There's you know, if they don't answer the phone, they don't answer the phone. I can't make them, you know. But teaching wise, what is there a little trick that this, you know, awesome 50-year-old teacher knows that I don't know?
Right.
You know, that it works for him and it might work for 75% of the time of this situation.
Yeah.
I want to go learn that trick, obviously, so I can, you know, up my ante.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, you know, I think maybe studying with different teachers, you get, or going to master classes, in you know, which is a great thing about universities and conservatories.
Yeah.
You get some perspective on the way some of the master teachers, what they do.
Handle something.
Yeah. I know my teacher one time, and man, this stuck with me. I don't know if you can do this in the university anymore, but I was playing a spiccato passage, and he comes up and he slugged me in the arm. He said, "Into the string." I was like, "Okay, Murray, I got it."
That's funny. Oh, don't worry, we can smack our students around.
Yeah.
You know, you just, you know, if you want a lawsuit, then it's cool. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's getting their attention, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
man. It's stuck, and I've played that passage the right way, I believe, since then.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I'm always wondering about that, about how hard to go, you know, and obviously not screaming and yelling, but I'm always feeling like the motivation, because I look at it as a spectrum. You have the drill sergeant, and then you have the, you know, motivation side, and I'm always wanting. What I want is this side, you know, that's what I want, but I've realized that just doesn't work all the time. So now I've come more to this side.
Yeah.
But then I feel like a little bit that that when I'm all nice, there's no consequences.
Yeah.
You know, so it's obvious this balance thing you get.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's really an answer, but
maybe, you know, maybe one thing is to tell the student that, you know, I'm asking you to do these things because you're not going to get a job if you don't.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Just be something that I'm definitely gonna have to. There's no, you know, it may be kind of a journey type of a situation instead of a destination. Find the final answer. You know,
right.
38 or something. But cool. Two more for you here. We've talked a lot about general advice, but do you have any advice for specifically like 20-year-oldish giggers or kind of new people that are trying to get into the music scene? Do you have any kind of general advice for them?
Well, in terms of practicing, do a lot of it, and then do it right. If you find that that something isn't working, you need to really break it down, analyze all the different physical aspects of it, and a lot of time it's really just going through the notes slowly if you're having trouble with a certain passage, and really getting the motor memory and the whole cog, you know, everything working together.
Yeah.
So and then listening. You know, I was surprised when I was at Indiana University how many people that were in the School of Music there didn't listen a lot. I think it's really critical. You know, listen and, you know, expand your CD collection or Spotify or whatever, but listen to just listen a lot.
Yeah.
And practice a lot.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely you hit on my two probably biggest things in my lessons is play it slow and work on parts of it. You know, don't try to do the whole song.
That's right. And maybe start with the part you can't play when you begin your practice.
Yeah.
I mean,
start the hardest part.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm doing that with a student right now. They're playing this Vivaldi violin concerto, a real famous violin one, but we decided, you know, this big 5 lines, 16 notes is the hardest spot in the song. Right. So we're going to start right now for your April contest. We're going to start right now hitting that spot.
Yeah.
Because this first page is easy.
Right.
We're going to just leave that till the end. You know, you're going to hit this hard spot, and so you get now 6 months to work on this hard spot and get it really good by the time you get, and then
Exactly.
later in 2 months or so we'll start on the beginning, which is really easy, you know.
Right.
And like I totally agree with the kind of breaking it, not just in the sense of, because when I talk to them, I always talk about breaking it down, not just in regards to like the measures or parts of the song, but into the parts of music, like work on just your rhythm or just your bowing or just the spiccato,
There
just
you go.
the, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Separating the different physical parts of a passage. Yeah, that's right. Did you ever know this one? Maybe you do. I went to a International Society of Bassists symposium one time, and this guy said, "Look, violin players do this all the time. You take a passage, and I think it was Mozart's 35th Symphony.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So instead of playing 4 equal notes, play bum bum ba da dum bum ba da dum, and then ba da dum bum ba da dum bum bum, and then
yeah.
bum ba da bum ba da bum bum.
Yeah, my teachers never had me do that, but I've
Yeah.
heard people practicing like that. So what would the benefit be of doing it like that?
Well, you see where your fingers stumble a little bit, you know, like where the notes are that you might have a little difficulty with. And I find, you know, on a passage like that, and it works really well with either running 16ths or running 8th notes, you know, that are up tempo.
When you have a long string of
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I guess it also maybe organizes it conceptually a bit. But if you do that for 5 or 10 minutes and then go back and play the passage the way it's written, you really see some progress.
Mm-hmm. Boy, are you talking about the? There was an excerpt we did in Symphony, and I think that's probably is number 35. It was rough.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Is
to
it
play.
the dun 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 dun?
Yeah.
That's
That's right.
Yeah. They all sound the same, but yeah, that was a beast, man. It was piano,
Yeah.
right, and it was it was rough.
Yeah.
It was,
I mean, apparently for Mozart it was easy, man. That scares you.
What a jerk. He was such a jerk. And then, and I like the other thing you said, too, about the listening, because I've sort of noticed that, too, that, because I tell people a lot that even though I didn't grow up with, like, classic rock, for example, I feel like I still grew up with classic rock. They had 101 The Fox on, like, every day.
Right.
I heard James Taylor, Carpenters, John Denver, Zeppelin. I mean, like all these people, you know. I heard them all through my childhood because they had them on.
Sure.
Because they had them rolling while I was playing G.I. Joes or something, right? They had John Denver rolling. So
exactly.
So and this happened to me at the jam the other day where we got up there and the guy calls what was that song? Oh, Fly Like an Eagle, right? So he calls Fly Like an Eagle, and I'm like, oh, okay. I've never played that song ever, but. I've heard it 500,000 times.
Yeah.
I'm like, I love that song.
Yeah.
And so we got up there, and you know, they start the dun dun, and then I mean, in 1 second I'm dun 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 boom dun, you know. I mean, so it's you know the listening just all of a sudden you're just there because you've been listening to all this classical music, to all this country, to all this.
Yeah. And of course, some of that stuff fits under your fingers because you practice scales and patterns and arpeggios and things, and you know that's what the vocabulary is.
Yeah.
For playing, you know, anything.
And then for sure, jazz, like you'll a lot of the chord progressions in jazz are very different, like compared to country, but they're all those just 2-5, 2-5, 2-5-1, 2-5-1, 2-5-1, you know, all these different versions, and you start hearing those a million times, then all of a sudden you get over to All the Things You Are or something, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this, you know, and you're just like, okay, you know. And,
right, 2-5 and E flat, and then
and then you hear that, and then you hear that minor, and you know that minor is setting you up right here for a 2-5, you know, and so you just you start boom, boom, boom.
Right. Yeah.
And and I think a lot of people don't listen near enough. I thought that's a great piece of advice that you said.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that to students all along, but you know, and professionals too. As you should.
That's Suzuki. That's the number one thing about Suzuki, and that's why their kids are killer when they get to be 17. You know, it's not just the 14 years of playing they already have, or the 11 years of playing. It's that they got killer ears,
right?
And they've listened to so much music. You know,
yeah.
So I think that's a great piece of advice. Cool, man. Well, last thing I was going to ask you is I'm always fascinated by gig stories. I know you've already talked about a couple, but
good. I'm waiting
sure,
for you to ask.
Yeah, I mean, you got any ridiculous ones?
Yeah, well,
or?
I don't know how funny it is, but it was funny to me at the time. It was when I was at Indiana University, and I worked with a drummer, Mr. Friend, and that's who he was, Mr. Friend. And Mr. Friend calls me up. He says, "I got a gig. It's a wedding gig." And, you know, in Indiana, you drive south a ways from Bloomington, and you're really in the country. I mean, like scary, you know, if you're not invited. Yeah. And so, you know, we drove out
like
this,
Deliverance kind of
country?
country?
that kind of thing. Or a little bit like a Quentin Tarantino film or something.
Yeah.
You drive out in the country, and all of a sudden it opens up, and you know, there's swamp on either side, and but here's this venue, you know, nice bar, and so we go set up, and we playing some blues, but the guy also wanted some country stuff, so doing all that, and then finally got to, you know, shake hands with the bride and groom and say, "How you doing?" They said, "We're doing great," and this is our third wedding anniversary, or third wedding for both of us. And you're like, "Oh, well, congratulations, you finally found each other." I said, No, this is the third time we've been married to each other." Oh, okay.
Wow, so this is their third wedding together. This one's going to work great.
It's going to work great.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Save some money, man. Just take separate vacations.
Yeah, I've never heard of 3 times. I've heard of twice.
Yeah, but
I've never heard of that before.
The same man, the same woman. This was their third wedding.
Oh, man.
So,
that is funny, dude. Yeah, like weddings are nuts. Weddings sometimes can be just absolutely crazy. When you have something awesomely awkward happen, and you're on stage.
Yeah, what do you do? Talk about smiling. You know, you just shake their hand and go, "Yay!"
Wow,
good for you.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, man, but I'm really glad to have you on because you're obviously, you know, doing a lot of very similar stuff to me and a lot of even other people in town, but it's always nice to talk to somebody who else is not just a music lover, but somebody else that kind of understands like I was kind of talking about, where you're in the blues world and they know a lot about music just like you do, but then when you say a name or something and they're like, "Who's that?" and you're like, "Oh, are you serious?" Like Coltrane or something, you know, and you're just like, or even Stravinsky. I just thought of Stravinsky. Yeah, that's funny you said that, but yeah, you mentioned a name and like this one really gets me. It's like somebody would tell me, they're like, "Oh man, Tennessee Waltz. Oh, that's the most beautiful song ever written," you know, and I was like. Like, have you ever heard of like Claire de Lune? Yeah. You know, you ever heard of like, you know, or anything in the Romantic era? Have you ever heard of like
all that, or some of the other tunes? I mean, like some of Jennifer Warren's stuff. You know, fabulous stuff with Van Dyke Parks.
So it's always nice to hear somebody talk, you know, because when they you know, when I hear somebody talk like a little bit about. Everything always has to be. They'll basically say the mentality that music has to be what the audience wants. Period. You know, and that's what music is. Yeah. And then you'll go kind of in your mind. I'm like, well, hold on, wait a second. You know, some of our most amazing pieces, everybody hates. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, like I always think of like Pink Floyd, you know, where some of the money or time or some of which we're here in some of these songs, I'm like, have you ever heard Echoes? You know, or have you ever heard of some of their other Adam Hart Mother or some of these other that are like
the early
great works of art, you know. That always it's funny to me when I listen to somebody and they don't have quite the perspective of listening.
Exactly. Well, that's important too, to continue to widen your perspectives, and you know, your perspective in a lot of ways. I mean, there are different audiences, but it's great to know that there's things in other genres that are really magnificent pieces. You know, great composition.
Last question. I just thought of this. Do you know Medeski, Martin, and Wood?
Mm-mm.
Do you know those dudes? They're a trio, and they're in this kind of area where they're super jazz trained and stuff, and they'll do kind of jammy stuff, and they're way more out there than like Fish. If you know Fish, I mean Fish is definitely like rock oriented, but these guys are like more jazz oriented.
Right.
And what are Chris Wood is their bass player, and he just thumps so hard, and it's just they're really groove oriented too.
Right.
What are some like bass, like, and I'm talking bass wise, some of the like pop artists that you think have like incorporated bass really good, or some of these people that are super famous?
Right.
Like, what are some people, or not even bass oriented, but what are some of your favorites that are like pop stuff?
Yeah. Well, I certainly like Joe Walsh's stuff.
Yeah.
And I tell you, if anybody
Don't be a suck up.
well, no, yeah, but the album Barnstorm.
Little bias, no. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah. Well, I could
No, I'm just
really use a
joking.
gig, man. Barnstorm. The first album that he did after the James Gang had incorporated a lot of kind of elements of classical music, you know, Western classical, and McLaughlin for me is a guy. I guess maybe that's not as quite as pop oriented, but there again talking about incorporating different influences. You know, all the Indian classical music and who else do I like? Early Genesis. You know.
Yeah, they had some wild stuff, didn't
yeah.
they? I mean, very complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah,
Very complicated.
for a pop band.
Yeah, yeah. And some of Lou Reed's stuff I think is great. You know, I mean, very interesting.
Speaking of Eagles, we play a bunch of Eagles in our band, and I've been, because our band is definitely country oriented, but we have a lot of classic rock in there, and we do it kind of country-fied. You know, we'll do like Blackwater, Doobie Brothers,
Right.
Long Train Running, and
That's a great
and
band.
and that's another great band. But definitely a lot of like kind of southern rock kind of stuff, which has got a very country flair. But
Right.
I've been blown away at some of the Eagles stuff, how country it sounds.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Like,
true.
I mean, Peace, Lazy Feelin', and
Yeah.
some of the other tunes that we've been Lion Eyes,
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean, and there's some beautiful songs that band did.
Yeah,
And it's,
yeah.
I've been just really surprised
I
how
tell
easy
you,
they fit.
their second album, Desperado,
Mhm.
is monumental. I think.
Mhm.
You know, Bernie Leadon playing banjo
Mhm.
on all that, and then there's a guy that could really play. Too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, he could play banjo as well as guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah, lot of country influence there. Of course, Henley's from Texas too. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't know where he was from. Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool, man. So what else you got? Anything else?
Well, no. Used to work with Dan Hicks in the Acoustic Warriors.
Oh, yeah,
and
we
that's
talk about
boy,
that,
I think he's one of the. He's a brilliant songwriter. Brilliant
Mhm.
songwriter. So if you haven't checked that out, that's great stuff. It was great to play in that band too. Talk about a band where everybody could really play and everybody listened. I was the junior man there in terms of listening. Those guys had all listened to the Hot Club stuff, but they'd also listened to a lot of the African American music from the 20s and 30s. Some fantastic vocal stuff. I mean, you have the blues and jazz influence, but vocal styles. I'm drawing a blank in terms of some of the names of the artists, but I mean, you know, Bing Crosby used to work with those groups some, and listening to any of that stuff you can listen to is really great.
Yeah, I really need to dive in more of that. That's about all the jazz I can really play is a lot of the 20s style stuff. I just can't handle bebop because I'm just not good enough. Yeah. But some of that stuff like really sounds great for violin.
Yeah,
and
there's some great music. Stuff Smith.
Stuff Smith, yeah. I mean, he's a great violin player, and Stefan is the king, you know, Capelli, but yeah, that stuff is really cool, and I really enjoy listening to that kind of stuff, because it's not as, this is not even a word, but it's not as labyrinthy as the bebop, you know, where you're sitting there and you're going through these 70 chords in the song, but it's just complicated enough to really do something cool with it, and it's kind of interesting, but it can what's the word? It can be accessible though to an untrained person.
That's right. Yeah. And a lot of great melodies and stuff like that, and harmonies. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's part writing that's just fantastic in a lot of that stuff.
That's cool, man. Well, I don't know. This is probably about good. Joe Pruessner. Yeah. Thanks for coming, man.
Bet. My pleasure.
Thanks for
great
sitting
talking
down.
to you.
Yeah, dude. Tom was absolutely right. You and I got along great.
That's great. Yeah.
So but definitely good luck with all your playing and stuff.
Thank you.
So where are you going back to now?
I'm going to head out to the East Coast and try to do a few things. Speaking of the Walsh family, Joe's younger brother, Mark Walsh. I'm going to try to get some stuff going on with him and see what's happening.
Sweet.
There. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah, well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
All right, that's the show.
Right.
KC Music Talk. Joe Pruessner. See you guys later.